Welcome to the Uncut podcast. I'm Pastor Luke.
I am Pastor Cameron.
And this is the Uncut podcast, where we have uncut, honest conversations about faith, life, and ministry. Today on the podcast, we're sitting down to kind of record, pick up a conversation that we were kind of maybe starting to have. I don't know exactly what the conversation is going to be exactly. Yeah. We've kind of, I don't know, maybe it's because we're, well, it's funny. We just did an episode on like social media and being on our phones, and the conversation we're having is a little bit sparked by what we see on social media.
Yeah.
I don't know. What would you kind of describe these videos as that we kind of are coming across and kind of interacting with in our social feeds?
I would say that they are usually little clips that are pulled out of a Sunday, like a Sunday service. Mm-hmm. Usually the senior pastor or lead pastor. And it is like them saying or doing the most cringe things you would ever... Like, I don't know who are these people that are sitting in your congregation that are putting up with this absolute nonsense.
Right. Why are you not getting up and just walking out?
Right. Or where is, like, they can't have a strong leadership structure that it's actually like holds the pastor accountable, or that the pastor at least submits to accountability. That's probably
or it's so insular and like it's a bunch of yes men.
Because there are some things recently that we've kind of sent back and forth to each other on Instagram or whatever that have been like, I would fire myself. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like, I love you, you're one of my closest friends, Luke. Mm-hmm. I never like preview your sermons to make sure that they're appropriate for, the pulpit of this church. And even though I love you, if you did something like I'm seeing in these clips, I would probably fire you before the service was over. Like, it's just
you should.
Right. It's that bad. And so I'm like, part of it is like, okay, could I be the victim of, someone just cutting out one little blip of a sermon and posting it online and being like, can you believe this? But
sure.
Yes, I could, but
we've done enough of these episodes to know that, like, if we took that out of context and made it into a clip, it could sound
worse than it actually
is, or it could sound really like thought provoking or whatever. But this isn't that.
This is not that. This is much, much different.
Right.
This is either what I would consider to be ungodly, unchristlike behavior, pushing the not even pushing the limits, blowing through, like diving off the cliff of cultural relevancy, just to try and connect with a contemporary audience. So much to the fact that it, like, I would say, blasphemes the name of God, the purpose of the church, the place of worship.
Yep.
And some of these churches are like pastors or churches where I was like, come on, you know better.
Right. Or you should know better.
Or you should know better.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, there's
read the room, bro.
There's two kind of ends of the spectrum. I guess there's these churches that are maybe a little bit, I guess some of the more completely and utterly outrageous things are being done in kind of smaller, more independent churches.
Probably churches you've never heard of.
Like pastors who don't have a significant platform other than now kind of being known for viral videos of like clips that they probably aren't putting out, but people probably are like going and looking at this church's live stream on Facebook every week and seeing if they do something crazy this week enough to, steal a clip of it and post it somewhere. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where we have maybe high-end, high-visible pastors and churches who are doing things to, a lot of times, a significant amount of applause and big crowd and amens. But is just, when you think at all critically about what's happening and what's being said, it's just...
I need to go take a shower after I'm done hearing it because I feel gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to play some of the clips?
I mean, we can. Or we can even just talk about them if we want to. It's kind of a...
Yeah, I don't think that has the same
punch.
I don't think it has the same punch. I'll play the one that I showed you earlier. About the guy that comes up and asks for prayer. Or asks to pray.
Okay, yeah.
I had searched for it again because I needed to find it. Oh, here it is. Okay. So. Karaoke bar. So the first part of the video, you can't really hear what's going on.
Yeah.
But this guy it's from the back of a sanctuary, pastor up front. This guy comes to the front asking either for prayer or if he can pray.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not entirely sure which.
And so then the pastor who is up front, then as he sees the man coming forward, responds in this fantastic fashion.
What are you coming up here to do? You want to come take over the service? Huh? What do you want? What? I just want a prayer. Get out of here.
Can I get a little grace?
No, you can't. No, you get out of here. Get him out of here. Drag this bozo out. Pull him out. Hey, help him out. Get him out. And you know what? Anybody wants to come up here and take over the service? We'll throw you out of here, buddy. This church is not a free-for-all. This isn't an open mic. This isn't a karaoke bar. Okay? I'm the man of God here. I meet the qualifications. I run this church. And if you don't like it, then get out. This is not some church where every first-time visitor and brand new believer and people who've never even read the Bible are going to come up and take over the service. Not happening. Okay? If you want that kind of watered-down leadership, go to some house church with your Amish buddies and sit around the coffee table with your coffee clatch. This is a New Testament church. We have a bishop here. We have an overseer here. Like it or lump it. And if you don't like it, feel free to get up and leave the service at any time. Or 50% of people walk out, I don't care. Because you know what? I'm not going to pastor a oneness cult. I'm not going to pastor a Pentecostal church. I'm the pastor of a Baptist church. And if you're not a Baptist, then get out down. Sit down.
Oh my God.
Talk about someone who had too much pre-workout in their morning devotionals.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I don't even know what that is. Or, like, I don't...
Like, sheer and utter total overreaction to a situation.
I mean, I think your description is the underreaction of the century. Because it's not. Because here's the thing. I think ultimately for me, that is the kicker, is that man just showed the character by which he pastors. Period. It is not as if he was like, oh, I just lost myself in a moment of passion.
Right.
You know, and something slipped out of my mouth that I didn't think of. Like, You feel something deep in your heart about, like, this is the way in which this man pastors these people, or doesn't pastor them, but iron fists them.
Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks.
The mouth speaks.
Right.
Right. And here's the thing, like his line about, I'm the man of God, I run this church.
Yeah, if you don't like it, get out.
Don't like it, get out. Pretty much, I mean, this is maybe this is an overstatement, but pretty much when you use those words and phrases, you show that you're not.
Right.
That you're not qualified.
Yeah.
That you are disqualified, that you're not the man of God to lead this.
It's kind of like
place.
leading with the statement, I think humility is my best.
Yeah, I'm the most humble person I know.
Yeah. This is like leading with that.
I am the most humble person that I know.
Yeah. And so when you undo what should be the stated and clear and obvious fact by your words and actions by stating it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, okay. Benefit of the doubt. A 2-minute clip. I don't know him. I don't know the church.
Sure.
But in a 2-minute clip, you get a really good idea of just who the man is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm willing to concede that, sure, like, he doesn't have to give over the microphone to anyone. Like I don't, like, if someone we did not know came up and approached the stage on Sunday, like, we're not going to just say, oh, sure,
here's
give them a microphone or something like that.
100%.
But we're not going to have them physically removed from the sanctuary.
And then flip out on the rest of the congregation.
Right.
You know, why don't you go meet with your Amish friend?
Which that's the weirdest. That's the statement where I'm like, there is some context that is needed for that statement.
Bro's Amish friend opened up a church at some point and he lost a bunch of people.
Amish church or something?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what he was talking about. But there's a gazillion ways you could have responded with that. Like, you could have, he said he had overseer and bishop. Like, so you've got other lay leaders. Have them come up, talk with the guy, and like either give him prayer in the middle of the service if that's what he was asking for, or like have them listen to what is it that you want to share or say, and they can. Yeah. There's a gazillion ways to have handled that.
Take him into an office, pray for him, do what needs to be done.
Right.
Without.
And you still get to maintain orderliness of. Like, the way he reacted did more to disrupt the orderliness of the worship and the service than that guy's request.
Yeah,
was like, and so it's just.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what I'm discovering? I think the older I get, or the longer I'm a pastor, is how little tolerance I have for abusive church leadership. Mm-hmm. It just like I feel very little desire in me to be exceedingly graceful in those situations.
Yeah.
Like with those that would actively do the church harm.
Yep.
Or the people in the church, or the church leadership, or the church staff, or whomever, that I'm just like, my wick is super short on that, or I guess my fuse is super short on that.
Yeah, and the thing like that frustrates me is like, having been closer to having graduated Bible college, and a lot of my friends and stuff, we all have gone into a lot of our first church positions, and the ones I've kept in touch with, I would probably say that like just off the top of my head, me doing an inventory of my friends who are in ministry or serving in ministry, most of them ended up in poor church leadership or unhealthy situations.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think, I mean, part of the reason simply is that when you're new, you just take whatever job you can get. But then I also think some of it has got to do with the like the culture around like the type of church that we expect churches to be. Like some of it's even just like organizational. I had a friend who's part of a denomination. He just left his position. And I was asking him, I was like, well, what steps? Because what he was describing to me was pretty atrocious behavior, some pretty awful stuff. And I was like, what steps did you take to kind of report or like seek to seek justice on this? Because you were done wrong, and multiple people are have been done wrong in the situation. And he's like, well, he's like, I pursued everything that I could, but the way that the structure of the organization, the church, the denomination, and all that leaves little teeth for there to be anything done about it until somebody inside of the system kind of makes it blow up or makes the pastor or the unhealthy leaders leave. There's nothing to be done. I was like, well, that's a systems problem. Like, going and filing reports that like, the denomination can hold on to, but can't do anything with. I'm like, well, that's pretty awful.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it's a, I don't know, maybe we've talked about this, but there is this weird upside down pyramid that's kind of happening when it comes to churches, right? The majority, when I say, so picture an upside down pyramid, at least it's the way I think about it, as you think the majority of Christians attend abnormally large churches. So like maybe an upside down pyramid is not a helpful way to think about it, but majority of Christians are attending mega churches, attending churches with really large attendance, but the majority of churches are around 100 people.
Did you say that backwards? So the majority of Christians attend mega churches rather than the majority of churches, or majority of Christians just attend regular churches?
So I think I said it right. So for example, the way that like kind of talked about this when I was studying, getting my pastoral ministry degree, is most of the people who I was in class with attended churches that were 500 plus. Like maybe not necessarily mega churches, but they were 500 plus. They were these big churches. And a lot of people think that is the normal church experience because that's where the majority of Christians are slowly funneling to. They're going to more and more big churches. But because those churches are big in attendance, there's fewer of them. And now we've got the majority of churches are actually around about 100 people, but that experience no longer encapsulates the majority experience of people's church attendance.
See, I would have thought that it would have been different. I would have thought that by sheer number of volume of smaller churches, and lower amount of mega churches, that while it appears as though more people go to big churches, there's just an undercurrent of so many people in smaller congregations, so that while big churches with a full sanctuary appear to be the norm because they're really big and really full, it's actually the smaller churches with 100 people because they're everywhere.
Right. I think that used to be the case. And I think what I was told over and over in my classes was that was not the case, that it had shifted, where more and more people are attending these, what people have come to think of as an average church size, right? Like some of the terms that we use to describe churches are sometimes wrong. people often will say, oh, well, I attend or you go to, or that is a small church. And they're referring to a church that's about 100 people, 150 people.
Yeah.
Really, that's an average sized church. And people think like a normal sized church is, upwards of 300, 400, 500 people plus.
I suppose it has a lot to do with where you live too.
It does.
So like here in Chautauqua County, if someone says, well, how many people are at your church? And I say, well, we average between 250 on a Sunday. It can somewhere in that realm is our norm. Yeah. And they're like, wow, that's a pretty good sized church. It's a pretty decent sized church. Like, well, yeah, maybe for Jamestown or Chautauqua County, but if you go to Chicago,
right, the suburbs of Chicago, which are famously known for big mega churches,
or down south, and a 200 person, 250 person church is a small community church. Yeah. I still generally know everyone's name here. Yeah. So I think context probably makes. Yeah. You're not going to trying to think on a, for instance, a national context is kind of hard. The largest church in the county here is 500. And that's a county of 100,000 people. Yeah. But then it's that same thing of the population, that strange population density towards urban centers that everybody starts kind of having to wrestle with around election time and stuff like that. 'Cause you might be confused why some states are conservative or why some states are blue or red, but it's got to do with where the population centers sit, So it's a similar kind of dynamic of that, of feeling oh, well, the whole state seems to be representative of this type of individual, but because the population rests so heavy somewhere else, the majority experience of that state sits somewhere else, or that area. Yeah. So it's a kind of maybe a similar kind of thing like that. But all that point, and maybe we'll look and see if we can't verify some stats or something on that. But I think my main point is that we're making normal certain church culture and experiences, either through what more and more people attend and call and consider to be a normal church experience, or through social media, right? Because now, what do you see? You get to see more on your phone and through your computer or whatever you see more of other churches than you probably do of your own church, if you're heavily engaged in Christian church social media. If you're constantly seeing sermon clips, or you're watching other people's sermons, you very well could be more exposed to churches that are not your church throughout the week. And if that's the case, you might be seeing, what you don't realize is that you're seeing you're seeing a small segment of churches represented that's popping up on your media feed. And you might begin to see that that should be what I expect, right? I should expect, a large service with all the trappings, and it should look like a concert, and it should feel this way, and the speaker should talk this way and dress this certain way. And so those expectations, I think, lead to compromises inside of who we want to be leaders, right? I think the myth is that a church will grow if you get a charismatic leader up front. And, that's when people begin to prioritize churches, when they're hiring for a pastor, they're like, well, we want to grow, and we want to be a big church, we want to be a successful church. That means we should probably get a pastor who looks like on the outside, whatever celebrity pastor they think is the best, and that doesn't have to look, that doesn't mean that they necessarily have really cool tennis shoes and look really hip. It could also mean they wear a suit. It can go both ways. Yep. Okay, we want someone who's
very polished at speaking, looks and acts a certain way, is really charismatic, can really rally people. But what you've done is you've put a significant outward appearance and skill set above inner character and qualifications.
Yeah. Charisma over character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And usually what happens is that the Lord will ultimately balance that scale.
Yeah.
I find, or at least my experience is that the Lord will bring the level of, He will bring the level. We will not He will match the level of our success with the level of our character in Him.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, not like I wouldn't etch that in stone tablets, right?
Sure.
But generally speaking, right, we don't, I think I said this a few weeks ago in a sermon, that we don't rise to the level of the potential of our calling.
Mm-hmm.
We fall to the level of our abiding in Christ.
Yeah.
So we will not rise to the potential of the calling that God has given to us, which is great because it comes from Him.
Yeah.
We will end up falling to the level of our personal abiding in Him and then leading others out of the overflow of that abiding relationship. Mm-hmm. And so when I see clips like that we just listened to, it makes me angry because, one, I don't like, it's a dereliction of duty.
Yeah.
But it's also it puts a very big blemish or spot on both the role of pastor and the body of the church itself.
Yeah. I mean, because these are, there's a, I don't think we talked about this last week, but media in general, and social media even more so than traditional media, gravitates towards what is shocking, controversial, angry, and it's the same. It's the same thing that happens when people are driving by a wreck on the highway, right? Everybody slows down and they rubberneck, they turn, they're looking at, they want to see what's going on, and so those things get traction, right? And so a clip like that probably does really well on social media. It's probably gains more watches, responses, and shares than somebody who actually does a really good job of preaching the gospel and, pointing people to Christ, because that's not as shocking. It's not as viral making, and so it is, I think one of the reasons that because I was thinking about this as we were getting ready, I was like, why are we going to talk about this? I was like, well, part of it is because chances are you're running across, if not that clip, you're running across clips like that.
Yep.
If you're and we got to think about them. We got to talk about them because they're not going to go away. I think they're here to stay. People are building, whole kind of platforms and reach and followers off of sharing content that is mostly just controversial, or just upsetting or inciting.
Well, like the reel that we sent each other a couple days apart about a pastor who shoots an Easter bunny on stage on Easter Sunday and then rants and raves about how we're not talking about the Easter bunny this morning, and then he has someone in a Santa Claus costume come and drag the dead Easter bunny off.
Well, and then he shoots Santa.
What is going on here?
I'm
what is going on?
I couldn't really see from the clip. Did he have like a gun and holster on him?
He's just like a cowboy.
Just like a cowboy. They had Texas flags everywhere, if I remember correctly. And what's I think even crazier is that he got 2 volunteers. Somebody dressed up in a Easter Bunny costume and Santa Claus costume.
I'm just like, what are people thinking?
So and the fun, I will take this pot shot at that clip. If you want to talk about like idols in the church, like, usurping, Christmas and Easter and like the commercialization of it.
Don't do it on that day.
Don't do it on that day. Or also take down the flags that aren't Christ from your church.
There you go.
An idol that I would say seems to be that you're oblivious to is not the Easter Bunny, but nationalism.
Nationalism. Yeah.
Take that down. So that just infuriates me. Or do we want to talk about the Beatles clip?
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah. So there's clip you sent me was large church, kind of stereotypical like concert looking sanctuary, lights, and everybody's got these like glow LED like tambourine shaker things, or I don't know, light things that the whole crowd's got. And the worship team is up there, and they're like leading the congregation and singing "Hey Jude," right? And I don't want to sing the whole song, or else we'll get like monetized band or something.
Right.
But I don't think my singing's that good. But they're all singing "Hey Jude," and this wasn't a clip that like somebody took of this church and then like put it and said like, "Isn't this shocking at what this church is doing?" This was a clip that church put together and said, "Hey, this is a thing we're doing. Like, we're starting all of our sermons or all of our services during the summer with like our favorite summer tune or something like that."
Yes.
And that week they had done a Beatles song. They did "Hey Jude" as the opening song, and the way they start all their services for the summer starts off with singing some pop song that everybody loves to jam out to, and they're all singing. And then once they're finished singing whatever that song is, presumably they transition somehow into singing worship songs to Jesus.
Yeah.
And
you can tell that the crowd is really into "Hey Jude."
yes.
Like really singing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not hard, nah, but like...
But like waving the tambourines.
Yep.
Arms up in the air, really singing. And then like... As soon as the worship music starts, I mean, I don't know. As soon as the worship music starts, tambourines go away. Like, so why is it bad? Why, or maybe it's not bad. Maybe we shouldn't just outright say it's bad. Why?
I don't know, like, because I know I can hear the apologist for someone who would argue for that, right? Like in my head, I can hear someone say, we've got people who don't know Jesus coming to this church, and like we want to show them that Christians can have fun too, and they don't have to just be, party poopers, and they can, they can enjoy a good Beatles song too, right? And so summer attendance is normally low, and so we do, particular sermon series and things like that to kind of like bring people in to continue to raise engagement and not just kind of just resign ourselves to letting summers be low attendance, right? It's all in the name of reaching people for Jesus. I can hear that rhetoric. I can hear that explanation for it. I can even recognize, some positive heart elements behind it. But for me, it conflates particularly and I even agree with a number of the sentiments I just said, but putting what is just mere entertainment that has no distinction between like what you would see at like a Beatles cover band concert, and then putting it right next to worship. And what's the discernible difference, and who can discern that difference?
Certainly not an unbeliever.
Right. Like
the ones you're
trying to reach.
You're trying to reach. Certainly, it's not someone who's marginalized.
Right. Because what is the difference? You have to have a theology of what's happening in those two moments, and what's the difference. And it begins to, what it does for me is it begins to pose a even more critical and crucial and scary question: is not what's happening during the singing of Hey Jude, what's happening during your worship, whether you sing Hey Jude or not.
Yep.
Because if you're willing to put them that close to each other, is it just a concert? Is it just like, let's get people to sing and like feel something? Or is it something more sacred that's supposed to be happening there than is happening? Yeah. And I find that really disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it just runs parallel with just a lot of dangerous ecclesiology, a lot of dangerous understanding of what the purpose of the church in the world is, and whether or not, I think we could have a pretty long conversation about whether or not the church should really work really hard to be culturally relevant.
Yeah. Like how hard are we supposed to try and cross that bridge?
Yeah.
Which I think has been like a default assumption that we ought to for several decades inside of a significant segment of the church. And I think we've come pretty close to getting to the bottom of that well.
Yeah. Yeah, because we see that we're not able to not cross lines. The church is generally not able to not be now indistinguishable from the rock concert that you're at.
Well, what is it that we're offering?
Right.
Are we offering Christ?
Is this Christocentric?
Yeah.
You know? And I agree with all the reasons you said. Well, yeah, like what's wrong with having fun and singing a fun song and all that? Well, nothing.
Right.
Nothing is wrong with it. But when we put it parallel to the experience of worship, we don't elevate Hey Jude. We cheapen
Christ.
Worship.
Yeah.
You know, so
do it in the Sunday picnic afterwards or something.
Yeah,
I don't know. I can imagine contexts in which that would be appropriate, but I don't like. What are we offering? Are we offering people entertainment, or are we offering people Christ?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time with that because I generally, the church that happened in, I generally respect their leadership, their pastor, and think that he has a lot of good things to say. Yeah. And is usually misunderstood. Right. In fact, his latest book, what's the heck is it called?
I don't know, because I don't pay that much attention to him, I don't think.
Anyway, he wrote a book. It's Andy Stanley, Irresistible, something like that. Anyway, he wrote a book that he really got lambasted for because he essentially called the church to task for its idolatry of the Bible. Now, you say that it's a thin line.
It's a thin line.
Really thin line.
Right. But we've talked about that. Yes, we've definitely talked about that issue. Yeah.
And how the church has put its authority in Scripture. And if you say that in any Christian church, you get an amen. Yeah. The authority of God is the Word of God, the Scripture. Right. Right? Yeah. And you said that here in the podcast, I think we actually have a little reel about it. Yep. That actually...
Some people even got mad about.
Yep, some people got mad about, right? That our authority is not the Scripture. Right. No, our authority is Jesus Christ. Right. All authority on heaven and earth has been given to him. And so he was trying to make a corrective of bringing people back to the center of the church is 100%
Right.
under the authority of Jesus.
Yeah. Which is not like it's not a new theological nuance. It's been around for a while.
Yep.
I think the other person who, at least in my mind, most famously kind of tried to make that distinction and sometimes gets misunderstood or lambasted for it was Barth. I think his understanding of Scripture and like he kind of reworked. He was a theologian working in Europe during a very liberal part of theology, and he came up with neo-orthodoxy, which was an attempt to return to orthodoxy, but through a theocentric or a God-centric and Christ-centric framework. So it was a different type of systematic theology. So when he came and talked about the Bible, it was, again, the Bible as not the Bible. It's not Father, Son, and Holy Bible, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and it's Christ as we know him through the Bible that we are submitting ourselves to. So, but that, again, that's a distinction that...
Yeah. So anyway, he took a lot of heat for that. And continued to defend it. And so, and I think it's accurate. And I don't get the sense that he doesn't think critically or intentionally about the types of things that they do in service. And I think most would say, and even I would say this, that it's not that's not like singing "Hey Jude" at the beginning of a worship service is not what I would consider to be a disqualifying thing. It's I think it's a leadership preferential thing probably. Sure. I would never do it because I don't know that I could ever feel good about the theological implications of doing something like that.
I think that's, at least in my mind, I think that's what Andy Stanley has probably been accused of the most over the years is that line of like, how far do you go in order to be winsome?
He goes pretty far.
Yep. So that's, He
also has incredible influence, reach, so. But then again, it's difficult to know the character of the man. By all accounts, he seems to be a man of God and, have pretty tremendous character. I did meet him once.
Oh, really?
Had a 3-minute conversation with him in a line at Catalyst West conference out in California. And he was one of the keynotes and did a great job. And he signed my book, the same book I was just referencing. Yeah. And we had a brief conversation with him. Seemed like a real genuine guy. But I'm hoping if we go to GLS, I can get a picture with Craig Rochelle, who I also have a picture. Who I also met out there once. But he trains jiu-jitsu now, so Craig and I are like besties. Yeah. Pastor of jiu-jitsu.
Right. We should do like a podcast trade-off. We bring him on here, and then he'll come on and we'll go on to his podcast. Right? Like,
let's go.
Let's do it. Like,
come on.
Our podcast is definitely as big as his.
Now you're talking. Yep.
But anyways, it does, like, I don't know, the face of what happens inside of churches, and it probably sped up because of, I feel like pre-pandemic, it was kind of the norm for a church to have at least an audio recording. Right? Like, it was pretty safe to say that, like, any church you went onto their YouTube or went onto like their web page, their website, you would find like an audio podcast of their sermons and their services. I think COVID and the pandemic bumped that to now that, like, everybody's at least got a bad video recording of their service, and usually in its entirety, posted on social media somewhere each week. That's now become like, pre-COVID, it was maybe like, a 50-50 chance as to whether or not you were going to find video recordings of sermons on a website. Now it's almost ubiquitous. You will find video recordings of things. And so now what is happening inside of churches is more and more visible than it ever has been before. I hope that with that comes some greater accountability, discussion, maybe some change. Hopefully. I hope that it doesn't become a cycle that just perpetuates itself, where we see more and more outrageous things beget more and more outrageous things.
Well, I mean, that ultimately is what has to happen, right? When you run in the norm of fairly outrageous things, you have to keep bumping the outrageous factor to hold control or hold attention of the crowd that you have gathered to see the outrageous things.
Right. This is not me, not my idea. Don't remember who said it or where I read it, but somebody pointed out that like what you win people with is what you win them to.
Yes.
Right. So if we're winning people to Christ with fancy songs or crazy, outrageous sermon illustrations or a fantastic worship experience, that's what we're winning them to. If we win them with the gospel, with grace, with Christ, that's what we're clearly winning them to. And it's hard to say. Like I'm not a sociologist. I don't have all the research. I haven't been to every church. Haven't been around long enough. But what seems to me from my vantage point is that a large reason why we have so many people who seem to be walking away from the faith or deconstructing or trying to figure out like jumping denominations and things like that is because we have people growing up in really anemic churches. Churches where I think like whether it's a big personality, certain type of experience, abusive relationship or abusive leadership that's kind of lends an air of authority or control or spirituality. And I think that lasts for so long, but then I think people eventually wake up and they step out of it and then they realize like, I don't have much substance behind what, if I had to go to a church that didn't have let's say like people had to go to a church and they didn't have access to podcasts or YouTube, and you had to sit underneath preaching that was faithful, Christ-centric, biblically expositional, all the positive things, but it really just wasn't all that good. Like, if you know what I mean, like someone who delivers the message that God has given them to deliver, but they're just not a good public speaker. They're not that great. What if that was the church you had to attend? What would happen to your faith and your relationship with Christ?
It'd be really difficult. Yeah. I mean, it would. Well, I mean, I don't know. I want to say like, no, like, because God is the one that, develops our relationship with him, and we, and then we can abide with Christ, even in the midst of non-charismatic preaching or whatever, that we can still grow in our faith and we're still discipled. So I would say, yeah, like it would be, it would be a much different experience, but I think you could still grow.
Yep. be a challenge.
Be a
right?
challenge.
And I'm not making an excuse. I don't think pastors should just say like, "Oh, it doesn't matter that I'm a bad public speaker." I think we should strive to grow in that. But the thing that I'm trying to drive at is I wonder is we have people who are connecting with people's good public speaking.
Yep.
And not Christ.
Yep.
And if they were forced to attend a church that had Christ but didn't have good public speaking, what would happen?
Right. It'd be like, would people be moved? Would people be moved in discipleship or moved closer to Jesus the same through sitting through one of your sermons as they would by reading the transcript? Mm-hmm. Because one, they're going to get just the content. The other, they're going to get the personality. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that there is a difference there.
Yeah.
Where did we start the conversation?
We started the conversation with just like, what is, I guess kind of just like opening it up with like, what are the things that like, we send these videos to each other with some regularity. I see, I spend any amount of time on social media. I'll run across one of these in a day, of somebody acting this way. And the question is what do we do with these? Yeah. I guess like, where do we process this?
Yeah, I think that we need to say that even though they're right in front of our face, they're probably not the norm.
Yep.
Don't get discouraged when you see them, because there are many, many, many faithful pastors who are not screaming at people, who are not doing outrageous things in order to, entertain a crowd, who simply want to bring people closer to Jesus. And so when you see them, don't get discouraged. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that
that's everywhere,
and that's the only thing that the church does. I would say this: let it move you towards praying for your pastor, for your pastors, wherever you go to church, wherever you're listening to. If it's you go to Conduit and we're your pastors, if you go somewhere else and you have pastors there or a pastor there or whatever, pray for them.
Yep.
Pray that they would hear from the Lord. Pray that they would be inspired to in their proclamation of the word, in their preaching, so that it would not just be a kind of like rote, dry, just communicating, passing on content, but that there would be a significant portion of their personality that would shine through, because that's God's working through our personalities,
right?
And then if you are getting into a place where you feel like those types of clips on social media or whatever are really discouraging or really angering or whatever they are, I mean, it might be wise to take a break from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think before I was officially in like ministry, I think I was younger. I hadn't gone to school yet. I was serving and volunteering in ministry, but I was beginning to encounter ministries and platforms where the whole ministry's job or idea or like goal was to essentially like call out, expose, or accuse false teachers, bad theology, bad churches, and like these things still exist. There's whole ministries that like that is almost all that they do. Is that I can even think of churches that spend a significant amount of time like in their preaching and public facing stuff, talking about other churches or other ministries that fail to be as faithful to Christ as they feel like they should be. And while I think like we've done, and we will continue to do, an occasional dive into and talking about other trends that we see in other churches and videos like this and all of that, by no means do I think like that's, neither of us want that to be a defining aspect of our ministry. Like I came to the conviction that being defined by what I'm against is a terrible way to go about doing pretty much anything.
Yep.
And so ministries or teaching ministries that are oriented around what they are primarily against is that's going to lead you to minister in a particularly unhelpful way, in my opinion. And so some of these clips can kind of lead you into that path. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever be against things. I'm not saying that either. Like we should be against certain things. But I want us to be, or at least I want to be a little bit more defined by what I'm for. Mm-hmm. I'm for Christ. I'm for following after him, for knowing him more. Mm-hmm. I want to, dedicate time to promoting that message. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that requires that we talk about the things that are not quite in line with that. But if that's all I end up doing, like I've never seen that bear good emotional and mental fruit in anyone's life.
Right.
I've never seen anyone whose like consistent intake was content that was calling out people. I can't remember what those ministries, there's a name for those types of ministries. Watchdog ministry is not the right thing, but contender ministry,
something like that.
There's something like that kind of defines those types of ministries. Anyone who's like,
they self-proclaim to be like an ombudsman of all churches and all ministries.
Yeah. And anyone who drinks from those on a regular basis, I've never seen positive fruits of the Spirit born out of that. I don't see meekness, self-control, love, gentle, kindness. Mm-hmm. I don't see those things. Mm-hmm. I see anger and frustration. And so the same thing with these clips is like, if we are continually taking in things that just like stir us up with anger towards that, like we need to be wise of what we're taking in, and also recognize too some of my philosophy of like social media argumentation, which is like Facebook is really well known for, and the comments of any post ever in the internet is known for, right? That kind of that back and forth, that arguing is, do you have a personal relationship with that person?
Right.
Do you have any context in which it would be appropriate for you to speak into their life?
Yeah.
And if you do, you should do it over the phone or in person and not over the social media. And if you don't have any context or relationship, you should probably just move on with your life.
That's why we have guidelines for social media use here as a church, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You won't see Cameron and I, particularly on I don't think in our private social media accounts or on the Conduit social media accounts. Like we're not out to pick arguments or
no, we won't. We just flat out won't.
Yeah, so. We'll either ignore you or just delete you.
Yep.
That's not. And we would have but we'll have a conversation if we have a relationship with you.
Yep. We'll talk about hard things.
Yeah.
Just not going to like do the tit for tat back and forth.
No, I'm not interested in defending myself against an unnamed username.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be wise. I suggest submit that as wise counsel for anyone who's on the internet. Don't,
whether you're a pastor
or not,
mm-hmm.
just don't argue with people on social media. I've never met anyone who was like, there was this one comment once someone made on the thing that I said, and they changed my mind.
Yeah.
I've never met that person.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
I don't think it happens.
No, it doesn't. No. Okay. Well, I probably end for there today. As always, please like this, subscribe to it, share it, download it, rate it if you can do that. If you have any questions for us that you would like us to tackle on the podcast, our mailbag number is 716-201-0507. And we'll try to do a mailbag episode here coming up soon.
Yep.
So thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
See you next time.